Okay, welcome back to Plan and Track. For those of you who are just coming in, just a reminder to please silence your cell phones. During the talk, if you want to ask questions, please do so in the app. And if there's time for Q&A at the end, I'll facilitate that through the app. I'm excited to announce our last speaker for the day, who probably needs no introduction after he rocked the keynote this morning. But Sherif Mansour has been at Atlassian for 7 years and is one of our principal product managers. Sherif has worked on Confluence, team calendars, Confluence questions, integration, and most recently is the platform product manager for Atlassian. A little fun fact, Sherif actually has 2 Jira tickets for when his kids were born on our public issue tracker, for which those of you who don't know is jira.atlassian.com. The Confluence team used to have a tradition where babies born during a release got their own Jira tickets for the release. I'm sure if you search for them, you'll find them in the Confluence release notes. Sherif tells me that's pretty much the best thing he's shipped since he's been at Atlassian. So please welcome Sherif to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. So just excuse me for a second. I'm working on this roadmap. 1 second. Q3. I just got to get this done before the end of the presentation. Social sign up. Yeah, that's probably a 4 in value, I think. And the cost is a 5. And Google Plus. Does anyone use that? Still, let's give that a 1. Cost is 8. Referral program. That'd be good value. And it's probably a 2. I think my roadmap's done. That's looking really good, I think. I know. I'll put it in a chart. People love charts. So let's just chart this. We'll put the value on one axis and cost on the other. And this will make it easy to make decisions, right? Because if I just do that, it'll be obvious what to pick. And looks like I'll just do the referral program and the iPhone app. And I'm done. Road mapping. It's pretty easy, isn't it? And I wonder how many of you guys think, we have these many dozens of frameworks that do these scoring ways to prioritize features. Give something a score and a value and opportunity, and there's some magic formula where you work something out. And I'm not sure I really subscribe to that view of road mapping being more of a science than it is an art. Now, scoring features and having prioritization frameworks, that's a great way to help you make decisions. But I'm hoping by the end of today, I can convince you that road mapping is actually much more of an art than it is a science. Because if it was just about giving some features some numbers, I'm sure we could probably pack up our bags and go home and automate our jobs in some way. So to do that, I'll only cover 2 main things today. First, I'll actually spend quite a bit of time talking about roadmap inputs. Because I can't talk about a roadmap without talking about inputs. That's a very critical foundation. And then for the rest of the talk, I'll talk about 3 different ways in which you can prioritize or choose to lead prioritization for your roadmap, alongside the many scoring frameworks that you might use out there. But I want to talk about 3 different ways. And hopefully by the end of it, you're thinking about roadmaps quite differently. And you're also thinking about different techniques to apply next time you do roadmap prioritization. So start off with a quick story. We just moved house. My wife has a lot of books. I cannot convince her for the life of me to get rid of her books and buy Kindle. She has a lot of them, and we had to buy a new bookshelf. And so we went to IKEA. First problem, went to IKEA to buy a bookshelf that actually looks just like this. 2 sides, shelves, like the most basic 101 sort of bookshelf, right? Drove out there, and what I thought would be a short trip, because we knew exactly what we wanted, would be in and out. Classic IKEA, they make you walk through the 10-kilometer maze, and you end up with a hot dog and something else you didn't want to eat, and then the long drive home. But I ended up getting this bookshelf, come home 3 hours later, very frustrated, open up the box, and she's like, "Can you put this together for this afternoon?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Open up the box. There's a lot of things there, a lot of screws and materials and instructions, and I'm like, how hard can this be? This can't be that hard, right? I'm not a very good handyman, by the way. So I put the sides up, and I'm like, oh, that's the backing board, so I'll put the back across there, and there's lots of nails, it looks like, so I just put the nails in, hammered about 50 nails all across the board, up and sides. So I've got my 2 sides and the back. All that's left is the shelves, right? Pick it up, and I kid you not, I got my sides the wrong way around. So the groove for the shelves was on the outside. And at the same time, my wife walks down the stairs and she looks at me and she's like, you didn't read the instructions, did you? I'm like, you feel terrible at this point. I totally failed to look at all the things in the box. And if you think about it, I actually failed to survey all the inputs that were there in the box. I should have looked at what tools were there, what nails were available, etc., what screws, and read the instructions before I made a decision for how I was going to go build this bookshelf. And so I want you really to be thinking about a roadmap. If you think about it the same way, it's really about a set of decisions. You really need to understand your inputs to make good decisions. I didn't survey my inputs. I just saw some things and were like, I think I know what I need to do next. I know how to build a bookshelf. It can't be that hard. But I completely failed to survey all my inputs. And so I want to start off this talk by thinking, firstly, one, roadmaps are really a set of decisions. And if they are, then how we think about them is really important. And understanding the inputs is probably the most critical thing we need to do to build a roadmap. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about inputs right now. Lots of different inputs you can talk about in your roadmap. I want to pick a few. The first ones are really about your roadmap should be a reflection of your company goals. Pretty obvious, right? And at Atlassian, we have a framework called the VTFM, Vision, Themes, Focus Areas, and Measures, VTFM. And we use this to kind of align the company on our goals, right? We produce a document each year for what the VTFM is, what our mission is, what our themes, what will we focus on to help us get us there, and then at last we have how we're going to measure and know that we've got there. And we have this at a company-wide level, and it helps us align for what we're doing. Now, our friends at Intercom have this beautiful quote that I love, and they say something along the lines of, a roadmap should really be a reflection of your company goals. And their test is, I should be able to pick up your roadmap item, any one of those bars that you guys draw on your roadmaps, and trace that all the way back to your goals. And I wonder if you went back to your offices and did that, would you have that? By the way, if you are thinking about doing if you want to learn more about VTFM, check out the Salesforce Behind the Cloud book. We've kind of copied a model off there and changed it a little bit, but they have a very similar framework. It's pretty handy for that. But the idea here is you have this set at a company level, then you have your products that go ahead and set their objectives and key results, or OKRs, to meet those company goals, and then you form your product roadmaps. You should go back to your products, look at every single bar that you've drawn in your roadmap, and work out, can you do that traceability loop? Can you go all the way up and do that? And if you can't, then have a discussion about why or why not. It should really be a reflection of your company goals. Second input to think about is your vision. And your vision is really about your take on what the future looks like, what problems you want to solve, and why the world's going to be a better place when you solve those problems. Now, your vision may typically take a set of maybe blog posts or a video, or maybe a set of prototypes to communicate it to your team. It's directionally right, like you're not going to get your vision 100% right, but you're heading in the right direction. But the vision is a really important attribute as an input for your team or your company when you build your roadmap, because if you're not doing that, you're going to flip-flop frequently. You have nothing to test every roadmap item on. You're going to ship your software, you get dozens of feature requests, and they're all valid. They all seem really good. But your job as a product manager is to decide what not to do. And if you can't test that on your vision, then you're in a lot of trouble. And they say the biggest culprit of roadmaps kind of going off track is really, I'm going to use this phrase, customer satisfaction requests that are maybe not aligned with your vision. Now, satisfying customers, that's not a bad thing. But which customers are headed in the direction that you want to take your product? I think this is a much harder question to answer. So you should be looking at all those, small quick wins that you think are quick wins and really testing them alongside your vision. Am I just trying to keep this set of customers quiet, but really it has nothing to do with where we're headed? Or is it actually important and fits with your vision? If you don't have that, you're going to keep flip-flopping around. Now, there's a lot to talk about visions. Actually, there's an awesome talk right now. Please don't leave the room. James Bryant, one of our principal designers, is talking about how they built a vision for the Bitbucket Pipelines team. Don't worry, I think all the talks are on YouTube within like a couple of hours. It's really good. And actually, we'll give a talk about tips for painting a vision tomorrow afternoon as well. Now, the second last input I want you guys to think about is your business model. Now, I think actually this is one we think about far less when you build a roadmap. Now, I've probably interviewed dozens, 50 product managers this year, and I love asking a question that goes something like this. you're a product manager and you've just joined our team, and we have 2 features we need to build. Doesn't matter what they are, feature A and feature B. And you need to decide which feature we're going to build next. Feature A is wanted a lot by lots and lots of small customers. And feature B, we have this one high-profile customer that's screaming at us for it. How do you decide what to build? How do you decide what to build? It's actually a really interesting question, because I don't think there's a right answer. It's just trying to work out people's methodologies and sit back. By the way, and you tell them you can only choose one of these 2. No matter how many times you say that, somehow product managers, they end up with an answer where they've still shipped both. You're like, no, you can only do one. Which one are you going to do? The one thing that rarely comes up in this answer, and I think we undervalue it, is what business model are we in? If we're in a high-cost, low-volume business, we'd prioritize features very, very differently to if we're in a low-cost and a high-volume business. And we really don't think about that when we're prioritizing our features. This one's particularly important when you have new product managers join your team, or you have someone from the outside that's coming in and suggesting things. You really need to be thinking about how is our business operating, and how should I be prioritizing features that reflect that business model. The last one, probably the most obvious one, is all your customer feedback channels. Probably one of your main inputs for building your roadmap. Now at Atlassian, we try to have one guide where we can give any new starter. These are all the feedback channels we have at Atlassian. It's just a giant table in Confluence, really. And for each feedback channel, we talk about things like, how do you get to it? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? What's it useful for? What's it not useful for? What are the kinds of personas that give us feedback on our issue tracker versus the ones that come through support? How much does it cost you as a product manager or a feature lead? How much does it cost you of your time to go query that feedback? And how much weight should you have towards it in your roadmap? This is probably arguably one of the most important inputs you have to building a roadmap. And so many people I see join teams and they respond to almost like the first customer feedback they get or the quickest customer feedback they get, and really don't think about surveying all what's in the box before they kind of go ahead and make a decision on what's going on in the roadmap. So my big test for you is you've got a new product manager joining your team tomorrow. What do you do? What do you give them? If you don't have something where you can give them a set of presentations or a discussion about all your inputs, you really just want to pause for a second and maybe spend some time, maybe even as a team, putting together all your inputs, document them together, agreeing as a team, this is where we get our roadmap inputs from. Once you've got all your inputs, it's much easier to form some ideas that are very balanced in your views and making a call for how you're going to put your roadmap together. So that's inputs. Now we're ready to go ahead and start prioritizing the roadmap. Talked about earlier all the scoring frameworks you could probably use. You can Google the hell out of that. There's like 1,001 prioritization frameworks where you can give things magical numbers and it tells you what to do next. I want to talk about 3 techniques that are a bit more different that we use at Atlassian. Now, I don't think there's any one right technique. The technique you might want to take may be different depending on the maturity of your product or the feature that you're working on, or maybe you might use a mix of techniques. So we're really talking about here, what should lead your prioritization when you go ahead and build a roadmap? So the first one is really a goal-driven roadmap. And you're like, Sherif, don't all roadmaps have goals? This is kind of obvious, right? So a couple of things I want to talk about here. You could give teams a solution, a metric, or a problem. These are 3 different goals you could ask them to go achieve. My favorite is giving teams a solution, right? So tell them exactly what they need to build. In fact, developers love it if you draw them UML diagrams that explain it for them. Really high level. They don't want any details. Hopefully, I don't have to tell you that you really shouldn't be thinking about giving teams solutions, or even thinking about writing your roadmap in terms of solutions. This is very dangerous ground, and you end up with committing to building features which may or may not be used, or committing to building something which, at the end of the day, you're not really sure of the value. I've spoken about, in extent, about anti-patterns of product managers working with engineers about this topic at the link there, so you can watch that for a bit of lighthearted comedy or watch me making fun of myself. But I want to talk about metrics, giving people metrics as a goal first. Now, giving people metrics is a great way to prioritize your roadmap. If you're trying to optimize a funnel, maybe you've got a feature you want to increase engagement or adoption for, this method works really well for that. And there's been a lot said about metrics. And if you haven't read this book, Lean Analytics book, highly, highly recommend it. Probably the best read I have had about using metrics as a product manager. And there's a few things it talks about what makes a good metric. And I want to share this with you guys. The first one is a good metrics is understandable. What does that mean? It means that if I have to give you a page that explains this metric for you, then we've kind of failed, right? So it has to be like, this is the metric, I understand it. Kind of obvious, but it's pretty hard to do when you're talking with a lot of features. Second thing is comparative. What am I comparing this to? Is it users? Is it competitors? Is it feature? You need something to compare it to. If it's some number by itself, it's pretty useless. You can't make a decision about it. The third metric, the third attribute of a good metric is really a ratio or rate. You know, we shipped this feature and hurrah, we had 10,000 more users. But hang on a sec, aren't we getting users every day? So what's the rate of change? Do we even know if it was a cause of this feature or we don't? And the last one, which I think is one we don't think about enough, is it behavior changing? And is it changing something in a meaningful way? I used the example of, remember Google's circles years ago, where you could the social network they shipped and you could organize your friends in circles? People were just organizing their friends in circles, but you did nothing with it. And I'm sure a ton of people were sitting back there looking at the data going, wow, people are using the feature, but we're actually not doing anything different in people's behaviors. We're just moving a metric randomly. So it's hard, but it actually requires a lot of thought. So some things to think about when you're setting a metric as a goal for a roadmap. Now, two things I want to talk about with metrics. Metrics are all the rave right now. If you don't wear a t-shirt that has some data metric joke in it, you're not cool. All the cool kids in the valley are talking about it. But there's two things that I think we have struggled with at Atlassian. We've made a few mistakes with that I wanted to share with you guys. Some learnings we've had from there. The first one with this metrics-driven culture is this: it can breed a trial and error approach. My 3-year-old son has a toy like this, and he picks it up and he has a shape, and let's say it's a circle, and the hole is a square, and he's trying to jam the circle in the square, and he can't get it in. He just tries the next one, a triangle, he can't get it in until he gets the circle, and then he gets it in. It's a trial and error approach. Kind of works, he eventually gets it. It takes him a long time to get it right. It's a very inefficient way of doing it. I try to have discussions with him. He's only 3 years old. I'm like, this is a circle, and then he can't work it out yet, but he'll work it out at some point, I hope. But we can end up having a mentality very similar to this when we're shipping software. Oh, let's do this. Actually, no, we've learned from past that we can't do this, or for this reason, we don't think we should be doing that. But it doesn't matter. We'll just try it. Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, we can try it. We try it. Doesn't work. Come back. We failed, and we failed fast. That's really good. I'm like, but we had 20 good reasons why it wasn't going to work at the start. Why do we still bother with doing that? And we have this I don't know who coined the fail and fail fast term. You hear that phrase all the time. And it's really great. And when you fail, you'd really do want to fail fast, right? If you run an experiment and it takes you forever to get the results, that's a very bad way of working out if you failed or not. But it's not something we should really be celebrating as such. You should celebrate that you failed fast, yes, but you shouldn't celebrate that you keep failing, because it really does but it easily falls into this mentality of this trial and error approach. So the second thing I want to talk about is having counter metrics. So you want to have a metric that you're going for, but you want to have guardrails to make sure that you're not just moving numbers around in your system. And let me give you an example of something we've learned at Atlassian. Everyone here use Confluence or know about Confluence? Yes, okay, lots of head nods, okay. We have this thing, you hit the create button, and we load this dialog to show you all the stuff you can create in Confluence, right? Templates, features, add-ons, etc. We wanted to reduce the friction of creation and increase the number of people who created content. That was our hypothesis. So what do? We split the button, and we said, hey, when you click the button, we'll go straight to creating blank pages. So you won't see all the things you could create. You'll only create blank pages. And then if you press that little ... thing, you'll see all this other stuff. We shipped it. We were watching one metric, the average number of pages per user. Oh boy, weren't we excited. Celebrate. Pages per user went up. It was actually pretty good. We're pretty happy about that. We didn't sit there and think about the counter metrics. What other metrics should we be watching and making sure don't go funny and whatever? A few weeks later, in some qualitative research, talking to customers and internal feedback, people started complaining. I created the thing, I meant it to be a blog post, but it was a page. Or do you have this feature? I'm like, yeah, it's in the create dialog. What? Wait, just press the ... thing. Well, what? I didn't even know that thing existed. Okay, started looking at the numbers. All of a sudden, our template usage is going down. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's an interesting discussion to have, right? We're getting more pages created per user, but template usage is going down. It's a good thing to wrestle with. And then when you look into more things, the editor features were going down. People were creating tables less, using macros less, doing mentions less. Because a lot of that stuff appeared in some of the templates that you saw in that create dialog. So what do you do here? We're getting average number of pages going up, but we're getting all this other stuff going down. So we had a really good discussion about the strategy of the product. What is it that we're trying to do? What's our vision? What's our mission? We want people to create, discuss, and organize work, all kinds of work. So if they're just creating blank pages, is that the right decision? We've seen a metric go up, but is that the right metric that we want to move up? Alistair, he leads design for our software teams at Atlassian. He has this awesome quote I love about being data informed and not being data driven. And finding that balance between using data to be one input into decision making and not making decisions just on that data. So we gave team a metric, but really what we probably should have given the team is a problem. Think about the problem we want to solve. Let's go back to, another quick quote. Julie Zhu from Facebook, she runs product at Facebook. She's really passionate about giving teams problems. She's seen time and time again, when you give teams problems over solutions, the outcome you get is 10 times better. They're much more engaged. They find many different ways they could solve the problem, and they're passionate and excited about that. Great blog post. I created a bit.ly link for that if you haven't checked it out, bit.ly/building product. Anyway, let's go back to our thing here. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Well, we were trying to do frictionless page creation because there's a bit of friction with that dialogue, but something very important here, we were trying to do it for people that already knew what they were doing. So if you knew you wanted to create a page, we should really just get out of your way and let you create a page. But maybe the mistake we made is we gave that to everyone, regardless of if they're an evaluator, or if they never used this tool before, everyone got the same experience. So if we go back to that problem, there's probably dozens of different ways we could solve that problem. We could give them shortcuts, adapt their design, give people frequently used, a whole bunch of different stuff, right? But when we start thinking about problems, all of a sudden we get much more benefits in terms of how we measure success and how we build our features. And focusing on problems doesn't only help us build better features and prioritize them better. It's a great way to think about an agile roadmap. We get asked this question all the time. Is there such a thing as an agile roadmap? Really? Like if I'm drawing these boxes and it's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, how is that agile? Like I've just committed Q3 and Q4 for the rest of the year and like, how's that agile? And so I think you can be a bit agile in how you communicate your roadmaps. First thing is focusing on problems. If you're writing in quarter 3 that you're shipping feature X, well, you're shipping feature X, you've written it down, right? But if you're writing quarter 3, we're solving this problem. Okay, how you solve that problem, you've got you've got some leeway for yourself to move, right? You haven't committed to shipping that specific feature. Second thing you want to think about, if you can, always harder if you have external stakeholders looking at your roadmaps, is maybe grouping your problems into themes and maybe doing your roadmap by theme. What I mean by that is, let's say you build a product that sends notifications, right? And a customer tells you, hey, I want some batch notifications, right? That's a solution. They've given you a solution. You could put that on your roadmap saying, batch notifications. Oh, well, you're shipping that feature. Or you could say, well, what's the problem? Okay, we want to reduce the signal to noise. They're getting a lot of emails. We just want to give them a better signal to all the noise they're getting. So maybe on your roadmap, you could put reduce the signal to noise. That's already much better. But maybe you want to give yourself a little bit more leeway in your roadmaps, a little bit more moving around on what you actually build, because you could build 20 features for that. It doesn't really matter. You haven't committed to a feature. You want to group into a theme. So on your roadmap, you're writing improved notifications instead of writing batch notifications. And that way, you've got many different problems you could solve to improve notifications. You give it a whole team and say, hey, team, you need to go improve notifications. Go work out what the top problems we need to solve there are, and then go ahead and solve them. The last thing, harder to do again with external stakeholders, but something we always fall back at Atlassian. Our roadmaps are mostly, not all the time, especially for integration projects that don't follow this model, now, next, and someday. What are we doing now? We agree the team, now is the quarter or the 4 weeks. This is not your backlog, by the way. This is like roadmap stuff. What are we doing now? What are we doing next? That's what your designers, engineers, PMs are thinking ahead and starting to spec out and get feedback and all that stuff. And someday. Don't ever bother speccing out, prioritizing your someday list. It'll change by the time you ship whatever's on your now list. Harder to do the stuff at the bottom, but definitely if you're thinking about writing your roadmap as a set of problems, you will get a lot of agility in how you can respond to change and move around. So a lot of things we've talked about there. Building your roadmaps around problems, thinking about being data informed and not data driven, beware of the trial and error approach, and how you can find some roadmap agility and respond to change if you're focusing on problems over solutions and even themes over problems if you can. All right, second possible technique you could use to drive roadmap prioritization, persona-driven. A persona-driven roadmap. Everyone remember this Simpsons episode, right? One of my favorite episodes. Homer, I can't remember how, he ends up designing a car. I think he won a competition or something, and he designs a car for people like himself. He absolutely loves it, right? And he has like this dome for the kids so he doesn't have to hear them, and like a gazillion horns and 1,000 cup holders. And then he shows it to everyone, and there's like this gasp, shock, horror, like, what the hell? Like, the truth is, Homer designed for his car for people like himself, right? Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of people like Homer in this world. By the way, some guy has really built this car. Google it, it's pretty entertaining. Yeah, but Homer's designed a car for the Homer persona, right? And Atlassian, we've talked about personas in the past. You can Google it and you'll find heaps of stuff on it, but we use personas for a lot of things. Personas are really archetypes of a set of research you've done that have grouped types of users together, right? So we have these persona cards at Atlassian, and I've got dozens of them here if you want to steal some and copy some ideas. Alana, William, Harvey, and we use them in our meetings with our engineers and our designers when we talk about features and we're building it for this person. And on the back, there's a set of accountability questions to think about, like, hey, this type of user likes this stuff, and this type of user interested in this stuff. Really helpful tool in building a shared understanding with your team when you're building features. But I want to talk about building features with personas. I want to talk about building roadmaps for personas. Before I do, we stick these personas everywhere, so they're in everyone's minds. Kind of creepy when you're in the bathroom, but it works. It works. So a persona-driven roadmap. When may you want to do this? They're really great when you need to do things like focus on a particular user. Maybe they're a champion of your product and you need to get them evangelized. Or maybe you want to complete a whole flow for a particular user. You may want to think about a persona-driven roadmap that way. And sometimes we take this approach for road mapping. In this example, we've got Alana, who's our business person, and William, who's our technical person, and they're a software team, and we had a backlog, an opportunity backlog for each of those people. We did a lot of interviews of Alana's and Will's and worked out what they wanted and kind of came up with a set of opportunities. So persona, you can use personas for a persona-driven roadmap, and you may prioritize your features just for the personas. Forget about the scoring card, maybe just go by persona. Another technique that we've been playing with is roles. Everyone here use Confluence questions, real quick? If you don't know about it, it's a plugin for Confluence. Just questions and answers. People can ask questions and you get answers for your company or your team. And so what we have here is a role-driven roadmap for Confluence questions. Now, personas can hold different roles. For example, I have my Alana card here. I feel like I'm playing a game. I'll trade you this for two other ones. Anyway, but Alana can hold many roles, right? She can hold a manager role, or she can hold a business analyst role. But she's still the same kind of person, but you see her in a wide variety of roles, right? And so, and this particular roadmap technique is prioritizing the roadmap by role. And this is really good if the role that does something, the person that does stuff for that role, triggers off another process, or it's a viral application. For example, we have a role here of someone asking a question. They're the asker. Now, they can hold different types of personas, but they're the asker. And so they've got different phases across the top of the table there. They have the doubt phase, where they don't know, they want to find an answer to the question. They have the seek phase, where they're looking around. They have the ask phase, where they ask the question. Then there's a wait phase. Anyway, you get the idea. In each of those phases, there's a bunch of problems we could solve for them, and we can build a roadmap around completing a flow for a particular role. And that works really well because you may want to have other roles that are dependent on this role. So in your app, you may have a creator and a consumer. And the creator needs to do these 5 things before the consumer goes ahead and does something else. So it's really helpful in viral or social networking apps to think about a role-driven roadmap. Now, I love personas. I think personas are awesome. They change the way we build our products. And a third way we've been using personas at Atlassian, a bit of persona overdose here, is personifying features. And this is an interesting technique we've tried in the last year or so. I think it's worked pretty well for us. This is really about thinking about features in abstractions, right? So just bear with me here. You guys know about the popular Confluence feature request where you wanted us to resize table columns? Yes? Seems like a trivial feature, doesn't it? Oh, the amount of pain we went through for that feature. Seems pretty simple. Resize table columns. How hard can that be, right? Okay, so when we resize a table column, do we want it to be fixed width or percentages? Percentages. Oh, wait, that's not going to work for some tables. Well, it's fixed width. Or let's just make it a setting. Oh, but what should be the default? It's probably percentages. So how do we make a decision about what we do with stuff like that? So we've been thinking about personifying features as well. So let me just give you a few examples. We have a persona we call it the basic table, pretty fancy names here, where it's just a table where you compare a whole bunch of things. Or the accountants table, where they have a lot of numbers in there, and it's important that numbers line up. Or we have the cheap layout table, which is, I'm using tables for something I probably shouldn't be using tables for, just to make this page look pretty. And the last one is maybe the design wall. I have a bunch of images and text, images and text. So then when we need to make decisions, when I resize the column, should the images in the design wall get smaller, or should we let them bleed over? Or what should be the default, percentages or fixed width? The accountant is going to hate percentages. All those large monitors that everyone has these days, they can't even follow his spreadsheet, right? You won't be able to follow that around. So which one do we optimize for? And what are our defaults? So personifying features helps a lot with making decisions here. So benefits we've got out of this. Number one, making much better decisions. What are we optimizing for? What are we not? What experiences are getting worse and what experiences are getting better? At least your team is getting aligned on this. Two, you have an improved understanding. So when I talk to you about a feature, you can say, oh, but in which use case? In the accountant use case or in the layout use case? I'm talking about the accountant use case. Okay, cool, yeah, you're right, blah, 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 blah. Three, it gives us much better ways to measure success. So think about this for a sec. What is the success metric for resizing a table? We said, do we even have why should we not have a metric? It's a good thing if people don't resize tables, right? Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Maybe we just got our defaults wrong. Maybe we should just try and minimize the amount of table resizing, and maybe that's the better solution to the problem. Number four, it really helps us anticipate feedback. So we know when we ship with a default using percentages that our Mr. or Mrs. accountant friend here, they're not going to like that. And they're going to get annoyed having a setting to switch to fixed width. That's okay. That's a pain we're willing to live with because we believe that's the majority use case. You can have this conversation with your team. So persona-driven roadmaps. We've talked about personifying roles and personifying users. They really help you focus on the user. And they're awesome, awesome way to drive roadmap decisions. You can now decide what's the majority use case, what are we optimizing for, and what are we not optimizing for. And the latest technique that I'm kind of loving right now is really thinking about personifying features. We're like, at Atlassian, we're thinking about, hey, in Confluence, we actually have page personas, and we have space personas. And when we think about it, we're like, hey, we have different sets of features for different types of pages. And it's a really good way to form a common vocabulary with your team to move your product forward and drive your roadmaps. All right, last technique. Oh man, I'm talking a lot. It's taking a while. Vision-driven road mapping. Last technique I want to talk about. I'll leave you with this quote. You only evaluate a product once. Mostly correct, most of the time. How many of you guys decide to come back and evaluate a product you have a bad experience with? Very rarely, right? So if that's the case, if generally speaking, most of the time you only evaluate a product once, how then should you prioritize your roadmap? Probably vastly different to the other techniques that I just showed you. So one technique we use at Atlassian, we always hear the phrase, put out the tent pegs, or lay the tent pegs out, or what are your tent pegs? And if you think about building a tent, what do? You put the tent pegs out, right? Then you kind of start to put up the sides, and then you kind of do the zips or whatever left there is in your tent. But you start by going broad. You put the tent pegs out. What does it do? It helps you, one, gives you the idea of how the tent will take shape, right? It also covers off a surface area for you to work in. So you kind of know this is my boundaries, this is what I'm doing over here. And it blocks off some space so that others can see that you're kind of working in this area. And so when we think about building software, we think about, when we're especially launching new products or maybe launching a new feature, a good technique to prioritize your roadmap may be going broad and laying out as many tent pegs as you can before you start going deep on each of them. How do we define what a tent peg is? We do this exercise at Atlassian called Build a Box, and I've spoken about this before. You can just check out the link there at the bottom. Idea here is pretty simple. When you buy a physical good, what do? You pretty much decide on the box. You look at the front. It's got a hero shot. This is an Australian Weet-Bix, by the way. Not a bird biscuit. Someone thought it was a bird biscuit. Australian cereal. On the side there, the yellow things, they're the 10 pegs. They're the kind of the 5 benefits or the 4 features, or whatever it is of your product. You make a decision on the physical box. In the software world, sometimes we forget about boxes because we don't ship software in boxes anymore. As a team, we always have exercises to build boxes. This is a workshop I came out of a few weeks ago where we literally got a box, got some paper, stuck it on there, drew 30 different options. What's the hero shot? What are our 3 10 pegs or 4 10 pegs? 10 pegs could be features or benefits, whatever your team finds it easier to explain with. But it really helps your team understand how broad your product is going and what the highlights of your product are. Quick example about laying 10 pegs. We launched a new add-on a few years ago called Team Calendars. Everyone here know Team Calendars, sort of? Okay. So the 10 pegs we had for Team Calendars were pretty simple. We had people. We wanted you to help you plan your people and your projects. Was the second 10 peg. And the last one was your events. And if we believed, we formed calendars around teams, not around individuals. We can help teams get insights into where people are at and how their leave plans impacts their Jira releases or their Jira projects and how their training may impact their events, etc. And so these were our 10 pegs. So the first version we released, we had a few features in the people bucket, a little bit in the Jira bucket, and we were pretty light on the events bucket. But we went broad, right? And you've got to polish the broad. I'm not talking about like shipping some crummy part here or whatever. But you're not doing your full backlog, right? So you went broad. And why do you do this? When you get an evaluator, if they evaluated the product with just the far left 10 peg, they're going to be like, well, this only does one thing. I'm not really interested, right? So how I prioritize and build my roadmap is very different. Now, we took a bit of an extreme approach here. We prioritize our 10 pegs over what you might consider table stakes features. So our first release of Team Calendars had zero permissions. So you could delete a calendar and you lost all your data. Whoa, was that the right decision? Was that the wrong decision? So a bit of context, we shipped this 4 years ago, before our cloud offering was really being used heavily. Most of our customers that wanted this were medium to large enterprise customers. They had 3 to 6 month sort of evaluation to purchase cycles. And so we shipped the first version knowing that we didn't have any permissions and documented that heavily and whatever. I think we had like 3 people notice. And the people that noticed, like, I presume this is coming, right? I'm just in my evaluation process. You're like, yeah, it's totally coming. We shipped it the next release. But think about that. Like, we shipped it without something that you'd consider to be table stakes. Maybe a bit of an extreme example. But you're gonna ship that anyway. There's no way you're not going to do permissions. You're going to do it. It was a new product launching. We wanted people to get as broad as possible. We either keep delaying the release, keep going until we're happy with whatever table stakes features are, which you can debate forever till the cows come home, or you get something out. So maybe think about laying 10 pegs, and think about 10 pegs at sometimes at the expense of table stakes, because your 10 pegs is what makes you unique, not the table stakes. If you ship awesome table stakes, no one cares. The 10 pegs is what makes your product or your feature unique. So lay your 10 pegs, think about the builder box exercise, and you may want to think about trading off some table stakes things where it makes sense, maybe not permissions. I don't know, still know if that was the right or the wrong thing for your 10 pegs. So 3 techniques on how to prioritize and build your roadmap. I hope I've given you a bit of a different perspective on roadmaps maybe than what you already have. There's a lot written about roadmaps, and a lot of it is really about some scoring formula or whatever. And I really do believe road mapping is much more of a messy process. It's an art, it's not a science. And the roadmap scoring will help in many ways. But hopefully you're thinking about now, your roadmaps being a set of decisions. And if they are, then surveying and understanding your inputs is arguably probably the most important thing that you and your team should be doing before you go ahead and plan your roadmap. I talked about 3 techniques: goal, persona, and vision-driven road mapping. Goal, great when you want to optimize a feature, a funnel, or move something forward. Persona-driven when we want to focus on a particular user, maybe improve customer satisfaction for a set of users, focus on a champion, or complete a loop on some viral or social software you're trying to build. And the last one, vision-driven road mapping. Great for when you're launching a new product or a new epic, maybe an existing product, and doing it that way. That's it for me. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Sherif. So we are just about out of time. I think we'll have time to answer one or two questions. So please go in and upvote the ones that you really want. Just to answer one of them now, the slides will be available online with the recording by the end of the day. So the first question, in a roadmap for teams that handle unplanned work, how do you account for that in long-range planning?
Should add a new technique to that road mapping thing, unplanned work road mapping. Yeah, I'd love to get some more context on that. Is that a bit of like a support team maybe that's doing Kanban and has a roadmap? Is that what it is? I actually, yeah, maybe I'll use a common analogy and a similar analogy, and maybe this will be a bad answer. We'll see how we go. People ask you, how do I deal with bugs versus features? Very similar question, because how much bugs can you fix? You're building software. You will have a never-ending list of bugs. You will always have bugs, right? Software is buggy, full stop. And so the way we try and solve that problem at Atlassian is, the best model we've had is, we have teams that allocate X percentage to bugs. It's fixed, that's it. It may change as we improve, as we grow the teams or whatever. X percent of our team will always be fixing bugs. And Y percent will be working on features, whatever it is. And over time, we will rotate who works on bug fix, so there's no like, hey, I'm stuck on bugs forever. But that way, you've got a permanent commitment towards bug fix and a permanent commitment towards feature work. And you may want to just play with that number as I go. So I guess to kind of answer that question, maybe a technique you might want to use is working out what percentage of your work is always planned, the inverse of that, and what percentage is unplanned, and always have a fixed set of people on your planned work versus your unplanned work. Don't know if that just made it more confusing or helped. I'd love to ask that person some more questions if you're interested afterwards. Sorry.
Okay, the next question. What happens, or how do you adjust roadmaps when timing becomes a critical factor?
How do you adjust roadmaps? Other than just moving the bars along? It's hard, and I actually don't have an answer other than just, if we're focusing on the problem and timing's a critical factor, I mean, you have the time, scope, quality triangle, right? So you kind of, one of them needs to give. You always want to be looking at cutting scope, not the other two, right? So cutting scope is probably the best thing. Sorry, it's a very poor answer. It's a difficult question.
Okay, we'll do one more. This one might be equally tough. How do you communicate a roadmap of problems to solve to executives?
Yeah, definitely. Because they're like, what actually are we shipping? Don't worry, we'll fix these set of problems. So one technique we actually saw someone do at Atlassian recently, which is really good. They're presenting their roadmap, and they were like, hey, for Q2, we're going to solve this problem. And then how we might solve this problem, they actually had concept shots or hero shots for 4 or 5 different ways they could solve that problem. So we're going to solve this problem about notifications, just an example, and here are 3 or 4 different features, but they had visual features, and it was just mocked up, like got a designer to mock up pretty quick. Now, you're not going to ship all of them, but we're going to do something like that. So it's directionally correct. The other thing to do is get them to come by to your side. If they want you to commit to a specific feature, sure, but understand what the implications are of that feature. We're learning as we go. This is the software world. We will ship it, we will learn, and maybe it'll be the wrong thing. So you kind of want to educate them on their side. But communicating maybe a wide variety of possible solutions is a technique, and little asterisks, which is we may not ship any of these, we may ship all of them, but it does just at least give them, oh, okay. Because the reason they're probably asking that question is they're just not 100% confident that what you're doing is, is going to be tangible or something. If it's a stakeholder like someone from marketing or whatever, agree on the story. The story should still work regardless of the feature that you're building, right? If you guys are agreed on the story that you're working on and the story you're going to market, that should pretty much work if you're aligned on the problem. It doesn't really matter what feature you're building, the story should still have legs. Yeah, don't know if that helps. Happy to be at the back for more questions if there is more.
Yeah, I think that's all we have time for today, but if you want to try to catch Sherif, he might stick
If you want
around
some of
for a little
these,
bit.
I got heaps if you want to steal some. Make my bag lighter. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you.